Welcome to Captain of Industry, a game where you're shipwrecked and need to get yourself settled to start a new civilization your way. One process that is potentially confusing to many beginner players is mining. How does it work? What's the best way to go about gathering the resources you need? Hi, I'm Charlie, and in this video, I've teamed up with Mafi Games to present you an in-depth guide to mining in Captain of Industry. Let's begin. Mining is required to source the raw resources that you're going to need to create new structures, advanced technology, maintain your equipment, and so much more. Around the map you've chosen, there are a variety of resource nodes that you can see above the ground. To get an informational look at these resources, use the Layers button in the lower left corner. This will display a bunch of colored pillars, which not only represent what resource is there, but also how much of it. Each layer on these colored bars represents 1 unit of depth. By this part here at the top, there is a significant amount of other resources on top of it, potentially. In this example, there's some rock, dirt, or other material that will need to be cleared in order to access the iron underneath. So let's talk about how all of this stuff works. Upon completing the vehicles and mining research, you'll unlock the mine control towers that you can build. These are used to control mining activities on your island. You can build these anywhere. They do not need to be super close to the site that you want to mine. However, you probably should build these things close to the site you're going to be working, because once you start kicking out vehicles from your vehicle depot, your idle trucks and excavators will rest here next to the tower when they have nothing to do. The work site, by the way, is wherever you say it is. There is this edit area button here on the mining tower UI, and you can draw a box anywhere on the island to tell this tower that this is their work area, and you can change this at any time. Vehicles that are designated to this mining tower, with these buttons here, will perform tasks you've designated in this area so long as the mining tower that they are connected to has valid work to do. So now that you've designated some vehicles to the mining tower, you'll need to tell these vehicles what you wish to do. Let's get them into the action. There's 2 main actions mining towers will facilitate for you: digging and collecting resources for usage, and dumping unneeded resources someplace. You should designate both of these actions, as both will be required for your vehicles. So let's start with mining and collecting. The mining tool at the bottom may seem confusing at first, but it's quite easy. And the dumping tool right next to it works under the same set of rules, just in reverse, and there's also a few extra details to look over. We'll do that next. First, let's try to dig into this mountain by telling the tower to flatten the land. That's this tool here. By default, the tool will adjust to the height of the terrain under the cursor, and by clicking and dragging through an area, you can designate this area to be flattened out to this height. If the area that you've highlighted is already this height or higher, there's nothing for the mining towers to do, and it will be grayed out like this. An active job site where there is currently something to do after you highlight it will be brighter in color like this. So with this highlight, we're telling the tower to flatten the area. If there is land or resources above this height, excavators will now be told to begin digging to clear it to that height. Notice how different elevations are labeled relative to sea level, so you can tell with these numbers how low or high an area is relative to other areas by using these numbers. We can make changes to adjust desired height with Q and E. See the tooltips here if you need a refresh at any time, and to see other types of actions like rotation. This designation UI is a visual representation of the new terrain shape that you want to be making. The flat, shaded area is where the ground will be after the task completes as placed. And the wireframe here references this position relative to the current height in that spot. So let's go ahead and flatten this land into this mountain here. We're going to drag on the ground like this, and I'm saying I want all of this to be the same height. Now, as long as your mining designations like this are inside the area of a mining tower and that tower has vehicles, well, work can then begin. So let's check back in after these guys have finished flattening this little bit out here. Okay, so we're back after some time, and the land is flattened out quite well. We can see, though, that there is clearly more resources here, as the ground is the resource color, and by using the layers overlay if we want to. There's plenty more depth to this resource, and while I would usually keep digging out a little bit more myself, for the purposes of this walkthrough, let's talk about digging down. This mining tool can also be used in slope mode to create a slope down or up, effectively digging up a ramp like if you're going up a mountain, or digging down to get resources further under the ground like what we're going to do. Notice that the shaded in part of this UI is now at an angle, indicating where the land will be once the task is completed and how it goes down as I drag with this mode. The wireframe references on these tiles also get larger and further away from the slope's shade because this is going deeper from where the ground currently is. Where you see the red lines indicates where the work cannot begin because it is either too deep or it's too far out of reach. As long as the slope begins at or above the ground, excavators can get to work on it. You cannot start a ramp too low, like starting it under the ground, because the excavators won't be able to reach it yet. See the red lines? If you're having a hard time telling where the land is, consider laying in 1 or 2 rows with the flat tool like this to get an idea of the height already there, and then switching to the slope tool. This will snap the slope tool to what you've already designated, which is the right height already. The mining tools in Captain of Industry will frequently snap to the height of adjacent mining designations already, to allow you to expand upon your instructions quickly without guessing, saving you time too. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start my ramp at this already flattened height, and I'm going to start it a little bit away from where the resources are, so that my ramp doesn't actually contain the resources I want to mine. This just means that I can now excavate the resources that would have otherwise made up the ramp. And we're going to go a little bit lower, let's say, I don't know, like maybe 3, 4, 5 levels down. It's right around this area is fine. So now that I've gotten to the height that I kind of want here, I'm going to switch to the flatten tool, which as you can see is now parallel to the ground, only lower now, starting instead by snapping to the height my ramp ends at. Now I can extend this designation out as far as I want. Notice how it's all at a lower height, and all of this area is marked with red outlines currently, because excavators cannot start there. They can, however, start here at the ramp's starting point at ground level, and so that's where they begin work. Now remember, you can't start a ramp under the current terrain, so in addition to using the flat tool to try to figure that out, you can also just use the slope tool and start higher than the current land and angle down. The excavators will just ignore the part that you've designated above ground since it's kind of already done, and it will start where they can start. While the mining tool instructs excavators to go dig down, the dumping tool works under the same rules, only in reverse, and targets trucks usually instead of other vehicles. You can use this tool in the same way that you use the mining tool, but to raise terrain, which is useful for making ramps to new elevations, or you can use this to flatten terrain out where it currently isn't at all, effectively extending your buildable land. A perfect task for getting that straight and level coastline for cargo ports later. There is, however, one big difference that the dumping tool has that separates it from the mining tool. Dumping doesn't have to take place within a mining tower's area. Trucks with dumpable resources, like dirt and slag, will take their resources to the nearest dumping site anyways, so long as the material is permitted there. Let's take a look at that really quick. So I'm going to go over to the cliffside here, where the land is clearly 2 different elevations. I'm going to start the slope at the elevation at the bottom, and I'm going to ramp it up to the elevation at the top of this. I'm marking this zone, telling trucks that they can take the dirt and rock and slag and all these other things that I don't have a use for, and they can dump them here in this shape. Make a ramp from the low ground up to the high ground. Now, I'm not just telling them where to dump, I can also tell them what they are allowed to dump. At the top of the screen, you'll see the vehicle queue, and clicking that, you'll see the global dumping rules. You can add and remove resources from this list as you wish, and whatever is on this list will be considered a dumpable resource for dumping zones around your island universally. So if I want a ramp that's way off in the distance, and it's the only dumping zone I've made, trucks will travel way over to this location to dump their rock, gravel, dirt, or even garbage if I allow it. If, however, I have specific needs and I want a certain resource to be only dumped in a location, the dumping zone should now be located with a mining tower. Mining towers do not need vehicles designated to them to be useful. Their area that you select will still determine the rules that are set in that area. So let's say that I want only dirt to be dumped here for this ramp and nothing else. I can place a mining tower here, and the UI looks very similar to what I had with the global settings just a moment ago. I can specifically designate what I want to be allowed here in the mining tower's area. Now trucks will only be allowed to dump dirt in this square. They'll have to go someplace else if they have other resources. And if they can't find a place that allows certain resources, like sand for example, which isn't allowed to be dumped anywhere by default, then they'll just sit here confused. And that's no good, especially if you're starting on the beach map, because there's an awful lot of sand for you to dig through. So make sure that you set areas where certain materials are allowed to be dumped. Couple of advanced tips and advice for certain situations. Let's start with ramps, as this can be a pain if done poorly. First, you should make ramps wider than you expect, like 2 or better yet even 3 tiles wide if you can, especially if they are made from loose material like sand and garbage. Digging around near loose material can be tricky, especially if you queue up a lot of stuff at a time. You may find every once in a while that your vehicles are getting stuck, either because excavators chose to mine designations slightly out of order, or you've created your ramps too narrow, like a single tile width, or maybe you're just mining around loose material and everything is shifting in ways that you didn't expect. Vehicles can sometimes get trapped. Now, when this happens and your vehicles are stuck, you'll have to spend Unity to recover the vehicle, and that will teleport them back to the vehicle depot that you built them from. It will also unassign them from the tower when you do this, so remember to reassign them back if you still need them to work there. Hopefully, they'll then drive and show up to the job site in a manner that allows them to drive out of it. If you're ever curious on where vehicles can travel, you can also check out the vehicle navigation overlay like this, and observe the struggles vehicles may be having. Red areas are unpassable, and also remember that while trucks can drive under transports of height 2 or 3 relative to the ground that they're over, excavators cannot travel under them at any height. They're just too tall. So if you need excavators to maneuver around the map with transports everywhere, you may find it easier to leave your pipes and belts at ground level and opt to build ramps over them, provided you have that researched. Another problem you'll likely run into with excavators is fuel usage. These machines use fuel as well, just like any other vehicle, and as a result, it'll need to come up out of the mines from time to time to refuel. They also travel pretty slowly relative to trucks, so in addition, you're also losing a lot of work time when they go refuel. If your fuel storage is far away, this can be a huge issue. In the very early game, you can build a simple fuel tank near the mines, and your trucks will keep their excess fuel in this tank, which could make the trip shorter for the excavators. But really, what you'll want to get as soon as possible to alleviate this problem is fuel stations. Fuel stations provide great automated logistical benefits for your excavators. By assigning a truck or two to this fuel station, trucks will now transport fuel down into the mines to your excavators and refuel them on the fly without them having to stop working. This is significantly more efficient, as the excavator can just keep working and filling trucks without having to stop. On that note, you'll likely want to designate more trucks at the mining tower than excavators, if you can afford it, as it takes time to deliver resources once dug up, and the excavators can continue to work to load other trucks while currently full trucks are making their deliveries. Finally, I'd like to mention some difficulties you may have when mining near loose material like sand. In addition to the increased risks of vehicles getting stuck, you also may find it safer, as well as more aesthetically pleasing, to utilize the new retaining walls located after efficient concrete in the tech tree. These walls help solve all sorts of issues you may run into, such as trucks not being able to reach excavators trying to mine near the edge, or just the fact that the edge just keeps taking up unnecessary time as loose material continues to fall into the mine. They'll be digging this stuff out for days. Digging around sand is especially troubling, as the real impacts of digging are always significantly farther out than what you've actually selected to dig, which can put buildings sitting nearby in danger of collapsing. Retaining walls are the only thing, as of this video, that can be built directly underground and will protect the edge of your mining sites, as well as some other things, which I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to watch my YouTube series to find out, wink wink. But it keeps the edges from falling in, and it gives you clean edges to your mines. I have intentionally left the other edge of this ramp here alone so that you can see the differences with sand. Now, these are only 5 levels high though, so make sure that you plan accordingly if you plan to go any deeper than this. And you can also stagger the walls like this if you need to. You can also use the same Q and E keys to raise the wall up, lining it up with specific terrain above ground, and perhaps even creating a dumping box for, like, say, having a more tidy place to put the most untidy of materials. Captain of Industry is a logistics-heavy game that could be that next 100+ hour management puzzle that you've been waiting for. With the quick tips from this video, I hope that I've answered some of your questions related to mining and dumping and have helped you become better prepared to tackle the early game and get yourself off to a great start on your island. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or drop by the official Captain of Industry Discord server linked in the pinned comment below the like button. I'd like to thank Mafi Games for sponsoring this video and of course you for watching. Have fun out there!